The Making of Modern America, From Revolution to Superpower. Introduction. The story of the United States is one of evolution, revolution, and reinvention. From a collection of British colonies on the edge of a vast continent to the globe's foremost economic and military power, modern America was forged through conflict, innovation, and a relentless pursuit of ideals. It is a history defined by extraordinary transformation, political, territorial, cultural, and technological. Yet, it is also a history marked by deep contradictions. Liberty alongside slavery, democracy tempered by exclusion, opportunity bounded by inequality. To understand the modern United States, one must journey through its foundational moments and crises, from the spark of revolution to the flames of civil war, from the skyscrapers of the Gilded Age to the battlegrounds of world wars, and from the social upheavals of the 1960s to the digital revolutions of the 21st century. Each era has shaped the national identity. This is not merely a history of dates and documents. It is the story of people, love, rebellion, and resistance, of compromise and confrontation. It is the story of women demanding the vote, of immigrants chasing dreams, of enslaved people fighting for freedom, and of innovators building new worlds. It is a story still in progress, a nation perpetually striving toward its most ambitious promises. 1. The American Revolution and Founding, 1765 to 1791. In the mid-18th century, the American colonies were a patchwork of settlements, governed by Great Britain, but developing their own identities. Despite their allegiance to the crown, colonists had begun to cultivate a spirit of independence. The seeds of revolution were sown when Britain, burdened by debt from the 7 Years' War, began imposing taxes on its American subjects. The Stamp Act of 1765 ignited widespread protest. It wasn't just about money, it was about principle. Colonists argued that taxation without representation violated their rights as Englishmen. The outcry unified disparate colonies, leading to boycotts, protests, and the emergence of leaders like Samuel Adams, James Otis, and Patrick Henry. Tensions escalated. The Boston Massacre in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party in 1773. DMO and STRATED, growing unrest. In response, Britain passed the Coercive Acts, punishing Massachusetts and tightening imperial control. In 1774, colonial delegates convened the First Continental Congress, the Coordinate Resistance. By 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, and war was inevitable. The Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia and appointed George Washington as commander of the Continental Army. On July 4, 1776, the colonies declared their independence. Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was a radical document asserting the right of people to overthrow tyrannical governments and outlining the Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality. The Revolutionary War was long and grueling. American forces suffered setbacks, but key victories at Saratoga, 1777, and Yorktown, 1781, with French assistance, turned the tide. The Treaty of Paris, 1783, officially ended the war, granting the United States its independence. Yet independence raised new questions. Under the Articles of Confederation, the national government was weak and unable to tax or regulate commerce. Economic chaos and internal dissent like Shays' Rebellion, revealed the fragility of the new nation. In 1787, delegates returned to Philadelphia with a bold plan to scrap the Articles and draft a new constitution. The U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1788, created a federal system with a stronger central government, a bicameral legislature, and separation of powers. But it was controversial. Many feared it gave too much power to the federal government. To secure ratification, the Bill of Rights and Amendments, protecting individual liberties, was added in 1791. By the end of the 18th century, the United States had laid the foundations of its government and ideals. Yet the contradiction of slavery persisted, and the meaning of freedom remained contested. 2. Early Republic and Expansion, 1790s–1830s. The 1790s were a critical period of political experimentation. George Washington, elected unanimously as the first president, set many precedents, including the two-term tradition. His administration dealt with debt, foreign threats, and internal dissent, including the Whiskey Rebellion. Under Alexander Hamilton's financial plan, the new government established a national bank and assumed state debts, moves that helped stabilize the economy but deepened political divisions. These divisions birthed America's first political parties. The Federalists, led by Hamilton, favored a strong central government and close ties to Britain. The Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, championed agrarianism, states' rights, and sympathy for revolutionary France. The election of 1800, in which Jefferson defeated John Adams, was a peaceful transfer of power, proof that the constitutional system could survive partisan conflict. Jefferson's presidency included the Louisiana Purchase 1803, doubling the nation's size and fueling the dream of westward expansion. But expansion brought new challenges. Lewis and Clark's expedition charted the new territories, while conflict with Native American nations increased. Meanwhile, European wars spilled across the Atlantic. British naval interference and the seizure of American sailors led to the War of 1812. Though inconclusive, the war fostered a new sense of national identity and produced heroes like Andrew Jackson, who would later become president. By the 1820s, the country was changing rapidly. The era of good feelings under President James Monroe reflected growing nationalism. The Monroe Doctrine 1823 warned European powers against further colonization in the Western Hemisphere. Bold assertion of American influence, yet the early Republic was also a time of increasing sectional tension. The economy diversified. The North industrialized while the South remained reliant on slavery and agriculture. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 attempted to maintain balance between free and slave states, but the debate over slavery's expansion loomed. Politically, democracy was expanding. Property requirements for voting were reduced, and more white men gained suffrage. The rise of Andrew Jackson signaled a new era of populist politics. Jackson championed the common man, but his policies, including the Indian Removal Act 1830, also reveal the darker side of expansionist democracy. As the nation pushed westward, it confronted the limits of its founding ideals. The early republic laid the groundwork for modern America through territorial growth, economic development, and democratic innovation, but also deepened the divisions that would later erupt into civil war. 3. The Age of Jackson and Sectional Tensions, 1830s to 1860. The presidency of Andrew Jackson marked a significant turning point in American political life. Elected in 1828 as a champion of the common man, Jackson's populist appeal and combative style redefined the presidency and reshaped American democracy. He expanded the power of the executive branch and took bold action, including vetoing the recharter of the Second Bank of the United States, which he saw as a tool of the elite. Jackson's policies deeply impacted Native American communities. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 authorized the forced relocation of native tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River. The infamous Trail of Tears saw thousands of Cherokee and other tribes suffer and die during their forced march to what is now Oklahoma. This policy exemplified the brutal cost of American expansion. Meanwhile, the debate over slavery intensified as new states were added to the Union. The balance between free and slave states became a central political issue. The Texas Revolution 1835-1836 and eventual annexation of Texas in 1845 reignited sectional tensions, especially as the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, brought vast new territories under U.S. control. The question of whether slavery would be allowed in the new territories divided the nation. The Wilmot Proviso, which sought to ban slavery in territories acquired from Mexico, failed but highlighted the growing rift. The Compromise of 1850, including the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, temporarily eased tensions but satisfied neither North nor South. As the 1860 presidential election approached, the country was on the brink. The rise of the new Republican Party, formed to oppose slavery's expansion, and the election of Abraham Lincoln, a moderate who opposed the spread of slavery, led Southern states to begin seceding from the Union. Civil War and Reconstruction, 1861 to 1877. In April 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter, and the Civil War began. The war would become the deadliest conflict in American history, pitting North against South, Union against Confederacy, over the fate of the nation and the institution of slavery. The Confederacy, formed by 11 Southern states, fought to preserve their way of life, including slavery, while the Union sought to restore the nation. Early battles were bloody and inconclusive. The war's scale became apparent at battles like Antietam, the single bloodiest day in American history, and Gettysburg, a turning point that ended Confederate hopes of victory in the North. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate-held territories to be free. While it didn't end slavery outright, it transformed the war into a fight for human liberation and paved the way for black soldiers to join the Union Army. Victory came in 1865 when Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse just days later. Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. The Union had been preserved, but the cost was staggering: over 600,000 dead, vast destruction in the South, and a wounded national psyche. Reconstruction began immediately. The 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal protection. The 15th Amendment aimed to protect black men's right to vote. Federal troops occupied the South to enforce these rights and rebuild the region. For a time, Black Americans held political office, built schools, and participated in civic life. But this progress sparked backlash. White supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan used violence and terror to suppress black political activity. The end of Reconstruction in 1877 through the Compromise of 1877 led to the withdrawal of federal troops and the rise of Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation and disenfranchisement for decades. 5. Industrialization and the Gilded Age, 1877 to 1900. With the South subdued and the frontier expanding, the United States entered a period of explosive growth. The Gilded Age, a term coined by Mark Twain, refers to an era glittering with wealth and innovation on the surface, but riddled with corruption, inequality, and exploitation underneath. Railroads crisscrossed the nation, linking markets and fueling westward expansion. Vast new industries, steel, oil, rail, finance emerged under the control of powerful businessmen like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and J.P. Morgan. These men amassed enormous fortunes and wielded immense political power. Cities swelled as immigrants poured into America seeking opportunity. From Ireland, Italy, Germany, China, and Eastern Europe they came, transforming the urban landscape. Yet many found only low wages, squalid housing, and dangerous working conditions. Tenement housing, child labor, and deadly factory conditions led to a new labor movement. Workers organized strikes and unions, including the Knights of Labor and later the American Federation of Labor. Violent clashes like the Haymarket Riot 1886 and the Pullman Strike 1894 highlighted the struggle between labor and capital. Employers and the government often sided against workers, using force to suppress dissent. Politics during the Gilded Age were characterized by patronage, machine politics, and limited reform. The federal government tended to support big business, maintain high tariffs, and avoid major social legislation. Yet reformers, known as muckrakers, began exposing corruption, child labor, and unsafe food practices, laying the groundwork for future change. Meanwhile, westward expansion continued with devastating consequences for Native Americans. The Homestead Act offered settlers free land, while the U.S. Army fought a series of brutal campaigns against indigenous tribes. The Battle of Little Bighorn 1876 was a rare Native victory, but by the 1890s, most tribes had been forced onto reservations. The Dawes Act 1887 attempted to assimilate Native Americans by breaking up communal land, a policy that further eroded indigenous culture and autonomy. The century closed with a nation transformed, industrial, urban, and increasingly powerful. But beneath the prosperity lay deep social divides. The Gilded Age raised urgent questions about fairness, justice, and the meaning of the American dream, questions that would dominate the 20th century. Thanks for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed this dive into history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the people who shaped our world. Until next time, keep questioning and stay curious.